I never thought my family would laugh at me the way they did when I told them about my work. Cursed evidence documentation? My mother scoffed, her voice dripping with disbelief. You'll lose your mind over this nonsense. You're disgracing our family. My father's eyes were cold, full of disdain. It's unhealthy the way you obsess over these ridiculous stories, he said. I stood there feeling the weight of their ridicule press down on me, blending with the shame that had already begun to fester inside me after I lost my job as a forensic archivist. It had started with the high-profile case, a missing persons investigation where I misfiled evidence just once. Once. Yet that one mistake cost me everything, and I was left to sift through the wreckage of my career. With nowhere else to turn, I found solace in the cursed artifacts that no one else dared to touch. The police evidence rooms were a dark labyrinth, filled with objects that held stories of tragedy, violence, and inexplicable phenomena. I became absorbed in cataloging these items, convinced they whispered secrets that could unravel the very fabric of reality. For years, I chased the ghosts of my past, mapping out the connections between these artifacts and the tragedies that surrounded them. I delved into folklore, searching for the threads that tied the physical to the supernatural. I became an expert, a name whispered in hushed tones amongst those who dared to tread into these shadowy realms. Yet even as I achieved chilling recognition, the echoes of my family's laughter haunted me. They were the ones who had pushed me into this dark obsession, and now they would face the consequences of their disbelief. Years later, I drove back to that old house, the place I had once called home. It loomed like a ghost, its familiar walls now tainted with memories of rejection. I had earned my reputation. I had survived the horrors that plagued my work, and I was not the same person who once stood in that living room, trembling under their scorn. I was darker, more profound, and I carried a weight that now felt like a crown. They were gathered in the living room, my family, still encapsulated in their mundane lives. Oblivious to the terror that simmered under the surface of their laughter, I could see the contempt in their eyes as I entered, the way they brushed off my presence like a shadow they could easily dismiss. But they would soon understand. "Look who it is," my brother sneered. "The family disgrace returns, all for a laugh." Ignoring him, I placed a battered box on the coffee table. The air in the room shifted, thickening as I opened it, revealing the cursed objects inside, fragments of lives irreparably altered. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out a rusted key, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to writhe under the dim light. "This," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside, "is a key that belonged to a man who vanished after opening a door to something not meant for this world." My mother rolled her eyes. "What a ridiculous story. You're still obsessed with fairy tales, I see." I could feel the energy in the room change, a palpable tension crackling in the air. "It's not a fairy tale," I replied, my voice low and steady. "This is real. It's what you never wanted to see." With a flick of my wrist, I dropped the key onto the table. Time seemed to stretch as it landed with a soft thud, and that was when the lights flickered. My family's laughter evaporated, replaced by a creeping unease that slithered around the edges of their dismissive expressions. "Is this supposed to scare us?" My father challenged, but even he couldn't mask the tremor in his voice. I leaned in, my gaze piercing through the layers of their disbelief. "You don't know what you're inviting when you mock what you don't understand. You will see." And then came the whispers. They started as a soft rustling, like the sound of leaves in a windless night. My brother's expression shifted, his bravado faltering. "What the hell is that?" he asked, his voice cracking. I watched as the shadows began to stretch across the walls, twisting and writhing like living things. Faces flickered in and out of view, tormented souls trapped in a cycle of despair. Their eyes were hollow, pleading, mirroring the memories of those whose lives had been shattered by the objects I had studied. "No," my mother said, her voice trembling. "This isn't real." But it was. The room grew colder, the whispers louder. A cacophony of anguish clawing at the edges of their sanity. I stood in the center, a dark silhouette amongst the chaos, the culmination of years spent wrestling with the horrors that had once been dismissed as madness. "You wanted to laugh at me?" I said, my voice rising above the din. "You wanted to call me insane? Look at what your ridicule has unleashed." The shadows coalesced, forming a figure, a man whose features twisted in agony, his mouth opening in a silent scream. My family recoiled, their faces pale, their laughter replaced by the chilling realization of their folly. "I've survived what you couldn't even fathom," I continued, my heart racing. "And now you will too. You'll understand what it means to face the truth." As the figure advanced toward them, their laughter faded into terrified gasps. I felt a sense of vindication, a dark satisfaction swelling within me. They had mocked me for years, and now they would bear witness to the very horrors they refused to acknowledge. The room erupted into chaos, their screams mingling with the whispers as shadows enveloped them, pulling them into the darkness that had been lurking just beyond their perception. I stepped back, watching as they became ensnared in the very nightmares I had faced alone. And then, silence. Finally, I turned, leaving the house behind me, stepping into the cold night air. The laughter had faded, replaced by a grave stillness. I could feel the weight of my experiences. The knowledge I had gained, and the truth that now resonated within me. I had transformed into something they could never understand, a keeper of secrets that transcended their disbelief. As I walked away, I felt the shadows stir around me, a reminder of the darkness I now commanded. They would never know the horrors I had faced, nor would they understand the price of their ridicule. I had emerged from the abyss, not just as a survivor, but as a harbinger of truth, forever marked by the darkness I had embraced.